chosen one. It happened this morning, but you moved through it like nothing had changed. You felt something slightly different, didn't you? Not loud, not obvious, just a quiet shift that didn't match the rest of your day. And you ignored it. Not because you didn't care, but because it didn't make sense yet. That's how it always begins, not with clarity, but with a feeling that refuses to explain itself. You thought it was just another normal morning, same thoughts, same rhythm, same distractions. But something didn't follow the pattern. Something didn't follow the pattern. Something moved without asking for your attention, and that's what you missed. But not completely, because if you had truly missed it, you wouldn't be here right now, feeling like something is trying to catch up to you. There's a delay between what happens and when you realize it happened, and you're inside that delay right now. You've been here before, haven't you? That moment where everything seemed unchanged on the outside, but internally, something refused to sit still. You tried to move on. You told yourself, it's nothing. But it didn't leave. It stayed, quietly, underneath everything else. Because what shifted wasn't external. It was alignment. And alignment doesn't announce itself. It rearranges things silently, then waits for you to notice. But that wasn't the full picture. Because what moved this morning wasn't random. It wasn't just a feeling passing through. It was something that had been building long before today. All those delays, all those moments where things didn't work out the way you expected, all those times you felt like nothing was happening, they weren't empty. They were holding space, preparing something that couldn't be rushed. And this morning it crossed a point. Not visibly, not in a way you could explain to someone else, but internally, something locked into place. You thought it meant something small, just another emotional wave, just another passing thought. But you misread it because you were expecting noise when it arrived in silence. And now there's this subtle pressure you can't explain, like something is trying to unfold, but it's waiting on you to catch up to it. That's why your attention keeps drifting back. That's why certain thoughts feel heavier than usual. That's why even small things today feel slightly different. You're not imagining it. You're late to something that already started. And the more you try to treat today like every other day, the more that feeling pulls at you. Because it doesn't want to be ignored anymore. It waited long enough. But here's where it gets deeper. You weren't supposed to recognize it immediately. Because if you had, you would have tried to control it. You would have questioned it, maybe even resisted it. So it entered quietly, without explanation, without pressure, just enough to shift you, without triggering you. And now, you're beginning to feel it, not fully, not clearly, but enough to know something is different. And that difference isn't going away. It's expanding, slowly, patiently. Like it knows you're still trying to understand it. But the truth is, understanding isn't what's required right now. Awareness is. Because the moment you fully see it, everything connected to this shift starts revealing itself. And that's why you're being pulled back into this feeling again. Like something is asking you to look closer this time. Not with your eyes, but with the part of you that noticed the shift before you could explain it. Because that first feeling you brushed off, it wasn't random, it was precise. It chose a moment when you were unguarded, when your mind wasn't trying to control everything, when you were just moving through your routine. And that's when it slipped in, quietly, almost respectfully. But now it's not staying quiet, now it's circling back. You can feel it in the pauses between your thoughts, in the moments where everything goes slightly still, like something is waiting for you to acknowledge it. And the strange part is, the more you try to ignore it, the clearer it becomes. Not louder, just more present, like it's adjusting to your awareness. But that wasn't the full picture. Because what you're feeling now isn't the beginning. It's the continuation of something that already accepted you before you accepted it. That's why it feels familiar, even though you can't trace it back to a specific memory. It's not new, it's recognized. And that recognition is what's making this harder to dismiss. You felt something like this before, But it didn't stay. It passed. It faded, and you assumed it meant nothing. But now, it didn't pass. It stayed. It followed you into moments where it shouldn't logically exist. And that's where your confusion started to turn into awareness. Because you can't place it, you can't label it, and yet you can't deny it. That quiet shift from this morning, it didn't leave you. It attached itself to your attention, and now it's slowly pulling you inward, not outward, not towards something external, but deeper into yourself, where you don't usually sit for too long, and that's intentional. Because if you stay there, even for a moment longer than you usually do, maybe that quiet shift you felt this morning is still trying to reach you now. Comment Amen if something inside you knows this isn't random. Stay connected with Born into Light so you don't miss what's unfolding within you. Something begins to surface, not answers, not clarity, but a deeper layer of that same feeling, and it feels heavier, not in a negative way, but in a way that carries meaning, like it's holding something you haven't fully accessed yet. You thought it was just a moment, but it's becoming a state, and that's the shift you didn't expect. Because moments are easy to ignore. States are not. They stay, they follow you into everything. And now, even when you try to distract yourself, there's a part of you that doesn't fully engage anymore. Like something else has your attention, even when you're not focusing on it. That's not confusion, that's transition. But here's where it turns. You might think you're supposed to figure this out, analyze it, make sense of it. But the moment you try to force understanding, it pulls back, not because it's leaving, but because it doesn't respond to control. It responds to recognition, the same recognition you felt for a split second this morning, before your mind stepped in and tried to label it. That moment, that exact moment, that's the key you almost overlooked, because it wasn't about what you thought, it was about what you felt before thinking began. And now, it's asking you to return there. Not fully, not all at once. Just enough to notice what you missed the first time, before your mind tried to turn it into something familiar. Because familiarity is how you protect yourself from change. And this isn't familiar. It only feels like it because it belongs to you. There's a difference. One is comfort, the other is truth. And truth doesn't always arrive in a way that feels safe. That's why you hesitated. That's why you moved past it. Not because it wasn't important, but because it didn't match anything you've been taught to recognize. It didn't come with noise. It didn't come with urgency. It didn't ask for your reaction. It simply existed. And that's what made it easy to overlook. But now it's not staying in the background anymore. Now it's stepping forward, slowly, without forcing itself. You can feel that shift, can't you? Not outside, inside. Like something is repositioning your attention without asking permission. And the more you sit with it, the more it starts to reveal not answers, but direction. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, but precise. And here's what changes everything. You're not being asked to chase it. You're being asked to stop moving past it. That's the difference you didn't see this morning. Because you kept going. You kept thinking. You kept filling the space where something was trying to settle. But that wasn't the full picture, because even when you moved on, it didn't. It adjusted. It followed you into different moments, waiting for a gap. Waiting for you to slow down, even slightly. And every time you almost did, something distracted you. Something pulled you back into the usual rhythm. And you thought that was coincidence. But it wasn't interference. It was timing. Because if you had fully noticed it too early, you would have tried to define it. And the moment you define something like this, you limit it, so it stayed just out of reach, close enough to feel, far enough to avoid being controlled. And now you're right at the edge of it again. You can feel it building, not outward but inward. Like something is forming just beneath your awareness, not rushing, not forcing, just beneath your awareness, not rushing, just becoming clearer. And that feeling from this morning, it's still there. Not as a memory, as a presence, slightly stronger now, slightly harder to ignore. And here's the part you didn't expect. It's not asking you to understand it. It's waiting to see if you can stay with it without needing to. Because the moment you do that, the moment you stop trying to figure it out, something shifts again. Not the same way as before, deeper, more defined, but also more demanding, not in pressure, in truth. Because once you see even a part of it, you won't be able to return to how you were moving before. And maybe that's what you felt earlier. Not just the shift, but the weight of what it would mean if you didn't ignore it this time. That hesitation, that quiet pull mixed with resistance, that wasn't confusion. It was recognition trying to surface, while you were still deciding if you were ready to see it. And you didn't decide, you moved on. But it didn't. It stayed exactly where it entered, waiting for you to come back to that same point. But now, with slightly more awareness, you're not standing in the same place you were this morning. Something in you has shifted just enough to recognize what you couldn't before. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to stop dismissing it. And that changes the way it responds to you. Because earlier, it approached you gently, almost like it didn't want to disturb your pace. Now, it's not asking in the same way. Now it's holding your attention instead of waiting for it. You can feel that difference. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. Like the space around your thoughts has tightened, not in pressure, but in focus. And that focus keeps pulling you back to that same internal point, the one you almost passed over, the one that didn't make sense at first. But now it's starting to carry weight, not answers, weight. And weight doesn't come from nothing. It comes from meaning that hasn't fully surfaced yet. That's why you can't shake it. That's why, even when you try to move forward, something keeps pausing you internally, not stopping you, just slowing you down enough to notice. And here's what's different now. You're not just feeling it. You're beginning to stay with it a little longer than before, just a few seconds more. But those seconds, they matter, because in those moments something starts to reveal itself differently, not as a thought, as a presence that's becoming more defined. Still quiet, still controlled, but no longer distant. And that's where most people turn away, right there. When it stops being easy to ignore, but still isn't easy to explain. But you didn't turn away. Not fully, you came back to it, even if you didn't realize that's what you were doing. But that wasn't the full picture, because this isn't just about noticing anymore. It's about what happens once you do. Because once your awareness touches something like this, it doesn't reset. It deepens, whether you want it to or not. That's why the feeling didn't stay the same. It evolved. It adapted to how much you allowed yourself to see. And now, it's asking for something different. Not attention, not understanding, something quieter but more difficult. Stillness. Not the kind where you stop moving physically, the kind where you stop interfering, where you don't rush to label or explain or escape. Because the moment you do that, you interrupt what's trying to form, and what's forming right now. It's not fragile, but it is precise. It requires you to not distort it. And that's new for you, because you're used to engaging with things actively, thinking, reacting, analyzing. But this moves when you don't. That's the part that feels unfamiliar, and maybe even uncomfortable. Because it places you in a position where you're not in control of the pace. You're only in control of whether you stay present. And if you think back just for a second, that moment this morning, before everything picked up again, there was a gap. Small, almost invisible. But something entered through that gap. And now that same gap is trying to open again. But this time it's slightly wider, slightly more noticeable. And the question isn't whether it's there. You already feel it. The question is, what happens if you don't move past it again, and instead You stay there just a second longer than your off 6 months of course allows. Not forcing anything, not searching, just not leaving, because that's the exact point where it changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but in a way that rearranges how you feel everything around it. You start to notice the silence inside that moment isn't empty, it's active, like something is already there, waiting for you to stop overriding it, and the moment you don't rush, it responds, not with words, not with clear direction, but with a deeper pull, almost like it recognizes that you finally didn't turn away. And that recognition, it unlocks a layer you didn't have access to before. You won't see it, but you'll feel the shift. It's heavier than before, more defined, less easy to question. And that's where it becomes undeniable, because earlier you could still convince yourself it was nothing. Now, that option is fading, slowly, quietly, but completely. And here's the part that might unsettle you. It's not asking for your permission anymore. Before, it waited. Now, it's unfolding, with or without your full understanding. But that wasn't the full picture, because it's not forcing you either. It's doing something more precise than that. It's placing you in front of a moment where your response matters more than your thoughts. And your it's force, scossa. Your automatic way of moving past things, it's starting to break right there. You can feel that resistance, can't you? That subtle tension between staying and escaping. That's not discomfort. That's the edge of something real. Because if it were false, you would have already dismissed it completely, but you didn't, you couldn't, and that tells you more than you've allowed yourself to admit. Because deep down you recognize this isn't something you created, it entered. And now it's expanding inside a space you didn't even realize was open. That same space from this morning, that small gap you barely noticed, it wasn't random, it was an opening, and you almost closed it without realizing. But now, it hasn't closed, it's still there, wider than before, more accessible, but also less forgiving, because now that you've come back to it, you won't be able to pretend it isn't there again, not in the same way. That option is gone. And that's where the shift deepens. Because you're no longer standing outside of it, you're inside it now, even if you don't fully understand what it is yet. And that changes how everything feels. Even the smallest things. They don't sit the same. They don't distract you the same. Because part of you is no longer fully available to them. It's here, with this. And the longer you stay, the more something begins to take shape. Not visibly, but undeniably, something is organizing itself beneath your awareness in a way you can't interrupt anymore. It's no longer just a feeling. It's structure, quiet, precise, unseen, but already influencing how you move, how you pause, how you notice. And that's why everything feels slightly misaligned now. Not wrong, just no longer matching who you were a few hours ago. Because you're not standing in the same internal position anymore, even if your surroundings haven't changed. That's the part that confuses you. You expect external confirmation, something obvious, something you can point to and say, this is why I feel different. But that's not how this works. This didn't come from outside, so it won't be proven outside. It's already been confirmed internally. And you felt that confirmation the moment you didn't move past it. That moment you stayed, just a little longer than usual, that's when it locked deeper. Not loudly, but permanently. And now, you're starting to sense the consequence of that. Because once something locks in like this, it doesn't reverse. It only unfolds. But that wasn't the full picture, because unfolding doesn't mean it reveals everything at once. It means it reveals only what you can hold without trying to control it. And right now, you're still adjusting. Still learning how to stay without interfering. Still resisting the 4-6 koch to turn it into something logical. And that resistance, it's thinning. You can feel it. That urge to explain everything, it's losing strength here, because explanation doesn't reach this depth. Only presence does, and that's what's changing in you. You're becoming more present with something you don't fully understand, and instead of pushing it away, you're allowing it to stay. Even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it doesn't fit your usual patterns. And that's exactly why it's growing clearer, because it's not being filtered anymore, it's being experienced directly, and that changes everything. Because when something is experienced without distortion, it begins to show you parts of yourself you haven't been operating from. Not new parts, deeper ones. Ones that were there but inactive, waiting. Not for the right time, for the right stillness. And that stillness, it almost happened this morning. But you moved too quickly. You filled the gap. You continued the scochet. And still, it didn't disappear. It waited. And now that same space has opened again. But this time, you didn't rush past it. You stayed, even if only slightly longer. And that slight difference, it changed how this is meeting you now. Because now, it's not just touching your awareness, it's settling into it. And the more it settles, the less room there is for you to pretend nothing is happening. That option is closing. Gently, but completely. And you can feel that, can't you? That quiet realization, building in the background, not fully formed yet, but already impossible to ignore. Not fully formed yet, but already impossible to ignore. And that's exactly why it's affecting you more now than when it first appeared. Because before it was easy to dismiss. Now it's beginning to define something, not clearly, but enough to shift how you relate to your own thoughts. You're not reacting the same way. There's a pause now, a space that wasn't there before. And inside that space, something is stabilizing, not asking, not pushing, just taking its place. And the more it settles, the more everything else starts to feel slightly out of sync. Not wrong, just less aligned with what's quietly forming inside you. And that's where the tension comes from. Not confusion, not uncertainty, but misalignment between what you've been doing and what this shift is starting to require. Because it is requiring something, not action, not decisions, something more subtle, consistency in presence. The same presence you almost accessed this morning before you moved too quickly. That moment, it wasn't just an opening. It was a test of whether you would stay or return to Ispori 6, Scoff, 8 Falls 8. And you returned, but not completely, because a part of you stayed behind, right there, in that unnoticed shift. And now you're feeling the pull of that part, drawing you back, not forcefully, but steadily. And the closer you get to it, the less comfortable distraction becomes. You've noticed that, haven't you? Things that used to fully occupy you now only hold you halfway, like something deeper has your attention, even when you're not consciously focusing on it. That's not loss of interest. That's reorientation. But that wasn't the full picture, because this isn't just pulling you inward. It's also separating you from the patterns that kept you from noticing it before. Quietly, gradually, without confrontation. And that's why it feels strange, because nothing external is demanding change, but internally, something no longer fits the same way. And you can't explain that to anyone, because it's not visible, it's not logical, it's felt. And that feeling, it's becoming more precise now, less vague, less easy to question, more direct, like it's starting to take shape in a way that doesn't need your interpretation anymore. And that's where it shifts again, because once something reaches that point, you don't interact with it the same way, you don't analyze it, you respond to it naturally, without forcing anything, without even realizing you've changed. And that's already starting, in small ways. Subtle choices, slight pauses, moments where you almost go back to SAFSACH, buck, but something in you holds for a second longer. That second, it's not random. It's alignment, trying to stabilize. And every time you allow that second to exist, it deepens, not dramatically, but enough to move you further into this without resistance. And now, you're no longer at the edge of it. You're inside its influence, even if you haven't fully seen what it's shaping yet. And that's why this feels different from anything before. Because before, you could step away. This time, you're already within it, and that's why it's not asking you to step in. It's asking you to stop pretending you haven't, because the shift already included you. Before you understood it, before you understood it, before you accepted it, before you even noticed it. That's why it feels like it's ahead of you, not waiting, already moving. And you're catching up, not to something new, but to something that already began with you in it. That realization, it's starting to form now, isn't it? Not as a clear thought, but as a quiet knowing that doesn't need explanation. And that knowing, it changes how you sit with this. Because now it's not about whether something is happening, it's about whether you're willing to stay present while it continues, without trying to slow it down, without trying to define it too early. Because the moment you try to finalize it, you reduce something that hasn't finished revealing itself. And you felt that tension earlier, that urge to figure it out, that pull to name it, to understand it, to control it. But you also felt something else, a quieter pull, asking you not to. That second pull, that's what's different this time. Because before, you would have followed the first instinct. You would have tried to make sense of everything immediately. But now, you're hesitating. You're allowing the unknown to stay just a little longer. And that hesitation, it's not weakness. It's alignment adjusting your six-poxtes Koch. But that wasn't the full picture. Because this isn't just about allowing it to stay. It's about what begins to happen when you do. Because when you don't interfere, it starts to organize itself more clearly, not in thoughts, in direction, subtle at first, almost like a feeling guiding your attention without telling you why. And if you follow that feeling, even slightly, you'll notice something shift again, not outside, inside, a deeper layer opening where things feel more certain, even without proof. That certainty, it doesn't come from logic. It comes from contact, direct contact with something that doesn't need explanation to be real. And that's what you're entering now. Not fully, but enough to feel the difference, enough to know this isn't passing. This isn't another moment that fades. This is something that builds, quietly, until it becomes undeniable. And you're in the stage where it's still forming, still shaping itself around your awareness, still adjusting to how much you're willing to stay present with it. And that willingness, it's growing, even if you haven't said it out loud, even if you're not fully conscious of it yet, because you're still here, still feeling it, still not moving past it, and that alone, that changes what this becomes next. Because the more you stay, the more it reveals, not in pieces, but in depth. And that depth, it's starting to reach a point where you won't be able to return to how you were moving before. Not because you're forced to change, but because something inside you no longer fits the old way. And you can feel that mismatch every time you try to return to it. It doesn't break loudly, it just doesn't hold you the same. What once felt normal now feels slightly off. Not wrong, just incomplete. And that feeling isn't coming from confusion. It's coming from a deeper alignment that already shifted this morning before you had words for it. You're only now catching up to what already changed. That's why it feels like you're adjusting to something you didn't consciously choose. Because you didn't choose it in your mind, it moved somewhere deeper. And now, your mind is trying to understand a decision that was never made there. But that wasn't the full picture. Because this isn't about leaving the old behind. It's about no longer being able to fully return to it. There's a difference. One is effort, the other is inevitability. And what you're feeling right now, it leans toward inevitability. Slow, quiet, but steady. Like something has already decided the direction, and you're being brought into awareness of it step by step. Not forced, just unable to ignore it anymore. And if you go back to that moment this morning, not the event, the feeling, that small pause where everything softened for a second, that wasn't empty. It was the first point where this new alignment touched you. You didn't recognize it then, but your body did, your attention did. That's why it stayed. That's why it followed you. That's why it's here now, clearer, heavier, more present. And now you're no longer questioning if something happened. You're starting to sense what it's doing. Not fully, but enough to feel the direction. And that direction, it's not pulling you outward. It's anchoring you inward, into a version of yourself that doesn't rush past these moments anymore. That doesn't need immediate answers. That doesn't break the silence just to feel in control. And that shift, it's subtle. But it changes everything. Because once you stop interrupting what's unfolding, you begin to witness it more clearly. And what you're beginning to witness now, it hasn't fully shown itself yet, but it's close, closer than it was this morning, closer than it was a few minutes ago. And you can feel that proximity, in the way your attention is holding here, without drifting, in the way something inside you feels alert but calm, like it knows something is about to surface, not all at once, but enough to change how you see what already happened. And that's where this deepens, because what moved this morning, it didn't finish, it only started. And what you're feeling right now, this quiet intensity, this pull that won't let you fully disconnect, this sense that something is forming just beneath your awareness, it's not leading you somewhere new. It's revealing something that already entered. Before you noticed, before you understood, before you were ready to stay with it. This didn't start when you clicked. It started before you were ready to see it. Subscribe and stay close, because you're not here by accident. Chosen one, this is only the beginning of what's opening inside you.